Thank you all for tuning back into another episode of Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast. Myself, Jeff Black, Brandon Cruz on the other line over there. Today is episode 16. We're going to cover metabolism myths such as metabolic damage, starvation mode, metabolism as we age, and differences in metabolism between not only males and females. But first, B-Man, how's your last 7 been?
Man, I got to tell you, my man, last week I was under the weather. You know that. I was down and out even during the podcast, but this week has been an incredible week. I shared off air with you a little nugget that I'm waiting to be able to get the approval for, but I've had, something big come up within my career, something I've been working for well over a decade, and an opportunity that I feel very blessed to be presented with. And so hopefully next week I'll be able to announce it, but it's been an incredible week. I actually took, that I'm someone, I work 7 days a week. I came from a workaholic household. That's just my nature, but I actually took a half day on Sunday to celebrate with someone special to me about some of the things that are happening in my life. And that's something I am really terrible about. I've skipped birthdays before, holidays. It doesn't matter. Like, I've worked through everything you could think of, and I'm really trying to slow down as I get older in age and just really acknowledge not only big events, whether it be a holiday or it be someone else's birthday or my own birthday, but also acknowledge the victories within my own life, because I had early success early on because I worked like a workaholic and I would just work through everything. So I got opportunities, especially within the corporate sector of my career, where I would take, July 4th and I would travel to LA and do an expo. You know what I mean? Because no one else would. So it let me climb up the corporate ladder within the sports nutrition industry very quickly because I was willing to do what others weren't. And so I think that doing that early on, like, keep in mind, I had a corporate career by 21 within the sports nutrition industry. So seeing that, it kind of like reinforced this bad habit of never celebrating things and just moving past them too quickly. And that's one thing, if I always try to pass on to my clients, like, I celebrate their little victories, but I'm a hypocrite in the fact that I generally don't celebrate my own. So this weekend, it was a chance to take the load off, go by the pool, sit back, have a nice dinner out, do our thing, just celebrate something that I've been working on for a long period of time, and really take the time to like slow down. And instead of just moving on to the next assignment or to the next check-in or to the next, onboarding of a client or to the next, thing on my to-do list or my goals list, because that's really how I am. I accomplish one thing and I move right on to the next thing. And if it's not that I have a next thing, it's I'm already planning the next thing. And you know how that feeling is. I know you can relate to that. And so it's about taking the time to just slow down, celebrate my victories, and just relish in the moment. And that's something that I haven't done, and I really need to start doing it. It was a great opportunity to do so this weekend.
Nice, man. Well, I know the good news. Too bad you audience members don't. But anyway, congrats on everything. It's well deserved because I know the kind of man you are. So well deserved, my friend. See, on my end, dude, it's been an interesting little few days. I went and off back air, but went to the pool and I hung out with my 2 neighbors and I just watched everybody get drunk as hell. But they were cool. They had a blunt, so I partook in that for a little bit. I haven't been really smoking much, so that was pretty nice. My buddy and I decided that we are going to do a history podcast together. Like, really? We are like real big history buffs, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, like just some like little side project, like maybe 1 episode a month. And we're thinking about either interviewing authors or like taking like the real like niche battles that like are really like random stories that people like had to do or survived.
Dude, I'm telling you, you're going to be like a full-time podcaster pretty soon, because this is going to be your 3rd show, my man.
I know, like, it's cool, but he's actually going to be helping me in iLead. He's a brilliant man financially, so he's going to come in and do some of the stuff with iLead. I formally announced that I will be teaching in iLead business theory and leadership theory. I think the 2 biggest things that coaches need to learn, especially as they're building a business. Like, it's great. Most every coach should already know how to build a diet. They should understand how to build a decent workout. They kind of should understand how to like tell people like live their life and have some.
Easier said than done, though, because many of the coaches in this industry don't even know the first comings of physiology, which is a shocker. I get on calls every week consulting coaches, even with big businesses, and I'm taken aback. And it's not, you don't know what you don't know, but if you're going to go into a space and proclaim to be very knowledgeable and to be education focused and evidence based, you can't do so if you don't know the info on the back end.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of good coaches that Michael, who runs iLead's, considering bringing in to teach the education side. But there is it's sad, man, when you work with these coaches. I've talked to them at PECs and they're running these online business, making 34, 50K a month, but they've got 20, 30K in overhead. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you got more overhead in your little online shop than I do in my brick and mortar. Yeah. I'm just like, that's fucked up. That's terrible advice. You get chewed up out there in that red ocean.
It's not only the fact that they go to business coaches. Like, this is my biggest thing with business coaches. I do have some friends that do that, or they engage in that, but often they're learning from a business coach that never knew how to run a successful coaching business in and of itself. So they only know the marketing end. They don't really know the business of coaching in and of itself. So it's hard for them to be able to teach you how to run better systems and to really run a productive online coaching business when they never did it themselves, first and foremost. And then they want you to outsource everything. And what I start to notice with a lot of the coaches and the teams that I work with and I consult with is that they're so used to outsourcing everything from, payment, but also like their emails to program design. Like, coaches are paying other coaches to write their programs for their clients. That's an issue, both at an ethical level, but also at a business level. So yeah, you might be making 10 or 20K a month, but you're paying out, 7 or 15K a month in overhead expenses. And the thing is, it's not only the issue that you're not making anything, so you're hardly staying afloat, but it's also you're not developing the skills nor gaining the experience of actually being a coach. Like, everything that I've done has been myself. And I'm not saying that's the best method, because I've had to take a lot of bumps and do a lot of, dirty work and things of that sort, but I know how to do every single part of my business. And I see a lot of people that lack that.
Yeah. So like for me, I've been asked to do a mentorship and I won't do it because I know my time value, in the sense, like, I could spend this with my coaches. I feel like that's better done, and my staff. So this will be the closest that anyone will ever get to me doing a mentorship, but I'm going to do it where it's like non-ego based. Like, we're going to really challenge ideas and really challenge the way things are done. And I'm going to be like, hey, like, I am a person that don't bring your emotions into this shit or you'll get killed. And that's just what business is. And I think what gives me an advantage in business is I don't love my companies. And that allows me to see them for what they are, to understand what to really get better at and where we're already good at. So
you're not attached to it's not that you don't love your companies, because that's going to get misconstrued by the audience.
You've had that conversation with me. Remember me and you had that
conversation. Yeah. You are just not attached. You are not your business, and your business is not you. It's a representation of yourself, but it isn't everything. Whereas I have the issue where this is me. This is me 100%. Yep. This, and that's why I have a lot of dilemmas in which I get emotionally invested into clientele and I take things personally. And those are issues that I have to work through.
Yep. And that's the best part about getting older. You get a wiser and age a little bit, and you get to learn from those lessons and get better, Absolutely. All right, man. You ready to dig into this? I know the audience, like, guys, shut the fuck up and get into it, but we're going to do it right now. All right. So we're going to begin with number one. Like we said, last week, if you did not tune in, please go check out the masterclass that we did on metabolic adaptation. We've had a lot of good reviews about it. Speaking of reviews, if you guys don't mind rating us on iTunes and Spotify while I'm speaking of that does help us. And you guys are doing a great job sharing it. We really appreciate it. But we wanted to kind of go a little bit further after that, because based on some of the questions, kind of expound upon it, because you just can't cover this one class. Like, it's really in depth, and there's really missing pieces to it that you have to tie together. So we decided today we would go with the myth of metabolic damage to start off and kind of get from there. So Brandon, before I say that, like, metabolic damage, I've been around for a long time. This appeared on the scene, I think, like the late 2000s was the big thing. Like, in coaches in the early 2010s were getting barbecued and roasted online if they were dare feeding clients less than 400 carbs. Like you could get people peeled with 400 carbs and fucking Twizzlers and everything in between. And it really started the metabolic adaptation thing. Like, it wasn't spoken of really until late 2000s. And then it caught fire in the prep contest world. They thought that the metabolic damage was the reason for all the other stuff, but it turned out not to really kind of be that to some degree. And there were a lot of other things, but we wanted to get into the myth of it. And like, that's kind of where I remember it starting from my coaching end. I remember it being spoken on like Professional Muscle, some of the boards, and then social media kind of merged. And then out of Instagram, it just kind of really blew up and went far away.
Yeah, it was like wildfire. So I started coaching in 2013, and I got so into metabolism because I was a personal trainer in the 2 or 3 years prior to that. And I used to have clients in person come to me and say, hey, I did a diet and I damaged my metabolism. And I started noticing, you have one person come to you and they say this thing and it's all right. It sticks out in your mind. But once you have one, and then it's five, and then it's a dozen, and then it's, it was very prevalent within the female community. I started noticing it be very prominent within female bikini athletes because the bikini division was just coming around. So when I started personally training, it was 2010, and bikini started in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. I know it was right around 2011,
Yeah,
and
it was,
2012 was men's physique.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing these competitors, or started encountering them. I was training them in the gym and I would do their nutrition as well. And they would have had, a cookie cutter macro coach before me. And in one prep, keep in mind that bikini at that time, bikini has completely transformed as a division. But at that point, this was beach lean. I'll tell you, my first men's physique show, I did it off of a photo shoot prep. I mean, I was lean, but it was nothing in comparison to what they get to today. And the same thing goes with bikini, but it was more of this like prophecy that they were being told like this, that they were damaged and that's why they weren't responding, or that's why the coach's plan wasn't working, or that's why, this, that, and the other. So, this podcast is going to be diving into some of the mythology or some of the myths and some of the misconceptions behind metabolism that not only that we've encountered as coaches, but also that we got specifically questions about, because I had a lot of questions regarding metabolic adaptations as well as metabolic damage and the differences between the two. So from just a broad level perspective, metabolic damage is the concept that adaptive thermogenesis, or the negative adaptations that we sustain during dieting or during weight loss, persists beyond the weight loss phase itself, where your metabolic rate stays permanently suppressed, so you won't be able to lose fat in the future as a result of what people say is you damaging or breaking your metabolism from dieting. And this myth originally came about from people taking the concept of the fact that the body conserves energy when we're in an energy deficit and when we're losing weight. And then it was taken way too far. And this is where Jeff and I are referring back to, because we encountered this. And then it was kind of used as like an excuse as to why some people struggle with fat loss. And they would just put it on that. So they weren't talking about tracking inaccuracies like we did with Alan Aragon. They weren't talking about maybe a downregulation in NEAT. Everything was to do with metabolic damage. That was the scapegoat for everything. And it just kind of perpetuated on itself. And it became a real issue within this industry. And the thing is, metabolic adaptation exists, but metabolic damage doesn't exist, as our body does conserve energy during a diet, but it won't completely stop weight loss and fat loss. And there was actually a review done a few years ago by Sinchenko in 2016 that specifically looked at whether metabolic damage occurred and whether negative metabolic adaptations persisted after people went from being in a dieted state, so doing a diet, and then going back into energy balance or back to maintenance calories. And it specifically analyzed studies where extreme weight loss was induced, and then they followed the subjects once they got out of the diet and out of the deficit and back to maintenance calories. And in this review, they looked at studies such as the Minnesota semi-starvation study, which is where they took participants and they lost a quarter, so 25% of their body weight. And these guys got down to minimal levels of body fat. So if you look at the case studies, they were averaging, most of the males were averaging around 5% body fat. So this is basically like competitor lean. They also looked at something called the biosphere experiment, which was a 2-long-year weight loss study. And they also examined cases of eating disorders, such as with anorexic females. And then in all the studies analyzed in this review, they found that the dieters' metabolic rates were restored once returning to energy balance and regaining the lean body mass they had lost. And they found that there was no sign of permanent metabolic damage in any of these studies, which led them to conclude that the theory of permanent diet-induced metabolic slowing in non-obese individuals is not supported by any of the current literature. And the issue with why metabolic damage has become such a prominent myth is because many confuse the fact that their metabolic rate lowers during weight loss, which we do see in all the research. We went over it last week. They take this to be a sign of metabolic damage, but this is exactly what we should expect when we're at a reduced and lowered body weight and we're in an energy deficit. We know that there are adaptations that occur during an energy deficit, but these are all reversible once we get back into energy balance or into a calorie surplus, which independently increases our metabolic rate, which is something that we've went through. We specifically covered how nutrition impacts total daily energy expenditure and resting metabolic rate. And we covered studies in that episode where we looked at the fact that you can get an independent increase in basal metabolic rate just from eating more. So just this, you have to realize that our body's extremely adaptive. So our energy expenditure is going to adapt to both under and overfeeding. And if we think about it from a logical perspective, Jeff and I kind of hit on this in last week's podcast, but bodybuilders would have the most likelihood of metabolic damage, as each time we diet down to get stage lean, we'd incur more and more metabolic damage. And eventually we wouldn't be able to diet for shows at all due to how, quote unquote, damaged our metabolism would be. But that isn't what we see. Like Jeff and I've done 15 contest preps. Jeff, I know you've probably done even more than that.
I think 25, 26 maybe.
So you would have been shot. You would have.
I've been done. I'm getting better, actually. I'm getting better as I go. Yeah, I know. That's the irony. I get leaner in between shows, stay leaner between shows, and get better. And my metabolic rate's up every year. So, and I'm 41. Just facts.
Yeah. So it just proves as to how this doesn't exist. This is a myth, and it's something that a lot of people. It's unfortunate because there's a lot of individuals within this space that will take something that's partially true and then will extrapolate it out. So we know metabolic adaptation exists. It happens during a phase of being in an energy deficit and losing body fat. This is a natural adaptation to the body. However, they'll take that information and then they'll spin it to sell this narrative where, hey, you're broken, so now I need to fix you. So that's how they sell their coaching. And that's a real big issue we see within every sector of this industry. Now, within our sector, it's hormonal imbalances and it's gut health. Let me tell you, like, if you actually look into the GI health literature, we didn't even have a word for the microbiome as of 20 years ago. When people say they're a gut health expert, they know very little about the gut, because the leading experts that do all the research, all the literature on the gut microbiome and on the microbiota will even admit that there are so many things that we do not know. So it's people are trying to sell these cookie cutter protocols and these fix it solutions. And so they make others believe that they've incurred damage. And it's not that you could do anything and just not suffer any repercussions. Yes, if you're a yo-yo dieter, you're going to have body fat overshooting. You might, increase fat mass. You might regain weight very quickly, but it's not due to the fact that you dieted. It's not like dieting inherently breaks your metabolism. It's the way that you go about things. It's almost like driving a car. That's like saying, driving a car, it's one of the leading causes of death in people under the age of like 40. And so that's like saying everyone that drives a car is going to die. No, if you drive like an asshole, you're going to have a higher likelihood of getting in an accident. Same thing with dieting. If you diet like an asshole, you're going to have a greater propensity, a greater likelihood to suffer from negative adaptations. And if you don't do things in a manner where you focus on habit change and behavior modification, you are going to predispose yourself to regaining fat post-diet and having not only more fat than you started with, but also a harder time next time. Because say, the typical case that we see, someone loses 25 pounds, they regain 30, 35, 40. Well, yeah, your next diet is going to be more difficult because you have a higher proportion of body fat as well as total body mass, total body weight to lose. So theoretically, it should be more difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you see a lot of is, like you said, someone will see a study and they extrapolate it. And because of the way marketing is, they wordsmith it down to this like minimal amount of words, skin idea. And I, as a writer, can appreciate it. But it's when they then take that sentence and expound it back out that I'm like, wow, that's not really right. You know what I mean? So that's what I think, when you look at these terms that are thrown around, which next one, we're going to get into, we'll just go ahead and do it. The starvation mode exists. I think you have to kind of look at it like in the way of a bigger picture. And Brandon, I'm going to let you talk about, you break that down, but then I want to kind of have a discussion. What is the line that, per se, coaches who are listening or clients who would be listening would say, like, that the marketing message has gone too far, or they're lying a little bit, or weaseling a little bit the words too much to fit a narrative?
Absolutely. So starvation mode is the concept that if you eat too little calories, that your body will eventually go into what they call starvation mode, and you won't be able to lose any more weight. And often those who believe in this starvation mode will say that they're eating so little that they're no longer able to lose weight, or that they're even gaining weight as a result of this starvation mode. And now here's the thing, guys. This is theoretically impossible, as if you're eating too little and you're actually in an energy deficit, you're in a caloric deficit, you will lose weight. And we also cannot gain weight in a deficit, as that would disprove the law of thermodynamics, which states that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So you can't just create body mass out of nothing. If you're in an energy deficit, there's no energy to create body mass. It's theoretically impossible to gain weight within that construct, or to gain actual like body fat within that. And I believe the theory of starvation mode was a gross extrapolation of the concept that your body conserves energy during a deficit as a survival mechanism. But those who claim starvation mode exists are reaching far too heavily. And that's what you're kind of alluding to, Jeff. Like, we do know that metabolic adaptation exists, but starvation mode doesn't, as our body does reduce our energy expenditure to conserve energy during an energy deficit, but it won't completely stop weight and fat loss. Because if you're in an energy deficit, you're going to be losing body mass, you're going to be losing weight. And what's crazy about this myth is that we literally have research dating back to the 1940s, which disproves this theory. So for example, there was a study that we've hit on several times within the podcast, but we've never really dug into it deeply. And there was a study done in the mid 1940s called the Minnesota Semi-Starvation Study. And this is a study that researchers did because they wanted to see the effects of extremely low calorie diets for long periods of time. So in this study, they took male subjects and placed them on a 50% calorie deficit, where they took them from a maintenance intake of around 3,200 calories. So they had a weight stabilization period, which was, you guys can kind of think of like a maintenance phase where they just maintain their body weight. And then they put them down to 1,500 calories, or it was 1,560 calories, I believe, per day over the course of a 6-month study. And this study in and of itself showed that starvation mode doesn't exist, as the men continued to lose weight throughout the entire course of the study. And the average male within the study lost between 24 to 25% of their body weight. And another thing that we've seen time and time again, countless times in weight loss literature, that's been done in the 80 years, give or take, since that study, is that we're in studies where calories are controlled, subjects continue dropping weight. And we also see in the studies that the larger of a deficit they use and the lower the amount of calories they put subjects on, the faster they lose weight and the more weight they lose. And this isn't to say, like, this isn't my suggestion, like you guys should just take this approach, but it does prove the fact that you can't gain weight from being in a deficit, and you will continue to lose weight if you are still in an energy deficit.
Okay, at what point do you think it gets sneaky with the word and the terming of starvation mode when people are using it? Meaning, like, at what point should someone be red flagged by like reading it, like as they're reading on it, like, oh, that's a good point. At what point does it get a little too twisted, if you know what I mean?
I even think the term is misleading, to be honest with you, like the whole
Okay,
starvation
good
mode,
stuff.
because this is a natural adaptation to the body. And here's the thing, there's a difference between telling someone, like, I have educated probably more than any coach within the realm of metabolic adaptation. Besides researchers, I've probably done more podcasts on this topic. And the reason for it is because, excuse me, I had so many clientele come to me that thought there was something wrong with them. And they were sold this by someone that was more educated than them, like an influencer, like a coach that they had worked with previously. And they made that person think that there was something wrong with them. And here's the issue with that. When you sell someone something, or you convince someone that they are damaged, or they are broken, or they have something wrong with them, then you're not only impacting their psychology, because now they truly do believe that thoughts become things, but you're also impacting their physiology, because now that person thinks that there's something wrong with them and they're not going to get results. So they either don't try as hard, or anytime they do face a stall, they do hit a weight loss plateau, they think it's because of this innate condition that they have, that they can't get rid of, that they have something wrong with their metabolism. And it starts as self-limiting belief. So it's not only impacting them from a mental perspective, but it's also impacting them from a physical perspective, because now they're less likely to try as hard in the gym. They're less likely to stay adherent to their diet. They suffer from the what the hell effect. So when they go off their diet and they gain some weight, they just say, what the hell? And they just keep eating. And so it's reinforcing these negative behaviors that are leading to the things that they think that they're naturally predisposed to. So for instance, someone faces a weight loss plateau and they veer off the diet because they're frustrated, because they think something's wrong with them, and then they regain weight. So now not only were they stalled, but now they've regained weight. And now, instead of blaming it on their actual actions, the fact that they ate more calories than they were burning, that they put themselves in a surplus, they blame it on the fact that, they think something's wrong with them, and they're just predisposed that that's going to happen anyway. So why try? And that's my whole issue with it.
So You wouldn't use that in any context, even wordsmithing it, just evening it out to an average Joe's or anything like that.
Absolutely not.
Okay, well,
No.
that's a fair thing to say.
And here's the thing. I always say this. You don't know what you don't know, but I know better. And so why am I going to sell that when I could easily explain the fact that there are natural adaptations that occur during a diet that will slow weight loss down. But if they stay in an energy deficit and we stay conscious of NEAT, because NEAT is the number one adaptation that we suffer from during a diet. So if we stay more cognizant of our steps, we're going to, we really see within the weight loss literature that even with significant weight loss, we only see a downregulation of our basal metabolic rate between 3 and 5%. And on average, that's between 50 to 70 calories for most individuals. That is not eating an apple a day. That is going on a 7 to 10-minute walk. So these are things that could easily be countered. So it's not that that's stalling your weight loss. These are other things within your behaviors and within your habits and within your lifestyle, not tracking accurately, slipping off plan, not accounting for bites, licks, and tastes, tracking inaccuracies. These are all things that we can increase awareness for. And I could easily explain, which I've done with hundreds of clients over the years, the fact that, yes, there are adaptations that will slow weight loss, but if you stay in an energy deficit, you stay, adherent to the plan, you will see weight loss. It's not like diets work. You know what I mean? It's not like,
if they did, there wouldn't be an industry.
Absolutely. So I would rather explain to them the actual what's going on, even if it's in layman's terms, what's going on physiologically, so they realize, hey, listen, this is something that happens. Everyone experiences it. Obviously, to the degree that they experience it is different. But my coach has me doing everything to mitigate the metabolic adaptations that happen during a diet, so I'm least susceptible to suffering from them, and I'm able to look at my behaviors, monitor and modify my habits in a way that will help me to offset these adaptations. And there isn't anything wrong. I should see this. I should be hungry, during a diet. That's an indication that I'm in an energy deficit. There's nothing wrong. This is a clear sign that I'm actually in the active component of weight loss and of fat loss.
Okay. So then you touched on it like at one point in that. I want to back it back to a question we got. So then based upon our conversation last week, would you say in all this that we've just talked about, like unpacking why we would not say starvation mode, does metabolic adaptation lead to weight regain? What is causing people to have that issue?
So here's the thing. A lot of people think that dieting has damaged their metabolism within the context of this conversation and left them broken, where they think that dieting doesn't work for them anymore and they're just automatically predisposed to regaining weight. And metabolic adaptation will happen to everyone if they lose enough weight. And this is something we covered in last week's episode. And this simply means that our body has become more efficient with the calories we give it. However, these adaptations are reversed once we get back into energy balance. So once you return to a state of maintenance calories, these adaptations that you suffered are reversed. And when it comes to metabolic adaptation, this is the thing that a lot of people don't hit on. And I really want to be very specific. And I want to say this loud and clear. There is not a single study that we have within the weight loss literature that shows that the degree of metabolic adaptation that one has experienced during a diet predicts that person's level of weight regain. If anything, those who usually see the greatest reductions and the largest metabolic adaptations have lost the most and have been the most successful with weight loss, which is why we see the greatest amount of metabolic adaptation. We also see within the Biggest Loser study that those that lost and kept off the most amount of weight had the largest amount of metabolic adaptation. And what's interesting is a lot of people will point to this exact study, so the Biggest Loser study, as a sign that metabolic damage does exist and does happen, as these individuals experience a large reduction in their total daily energy expenditure that persisted after the weight loss phase. But recently, the lead researcher, actually just this past year, the lead researcher on that assignment that did it years ago, Dr. Kevin Hall, he did a reanalysis of this study where he found that the individuals who had the greatest degree of metabolic adaptation and the greatest downregulations or reductions in total daily energy expenditure happened to be the ones that had lost the most and maintained the most amount of the weight loss out of all the contestants in the contest. So it wasn't that these individuals experienced metabolic damage and it drove them to regain their weight as a result. They actually were the ones keeping off the most amount of weight. And in actuality, they still had a lower energy expenditure because they were maintaining such a large magnitude of weight loss and fat loss for years after, and were far below their initial starting weight. So I believe that what they did was over the course of 6 years, they maintained a 52-pound weight loss. So keep in mind, yeah, their energy expenditure is not back to baseline because they're not 52 pounds heavier. they're not back to where they were initially. So when you look at their pre-testing and then their post-testing, they're still in a weight reduced state. So they're still, down regulated because there are lighter, smaller individuals. So obviously they're not going to burn as many calories. If you were 252 pounds and you got down to 200 pounds, your body's not going to still burn the same amount of energy it was at 252. That doesn't make any theoretical sense. But people will take this study and will make it sound like this is a sign of metabolic damage, when in actuality, metabolic adaptation is a sign of weight loss success and weight loss maintenance within this case. And this should make sense because even in last week's episode, we covered how the likelihood of us experiencing metabolic adaptation and the degree to which we experience it heavily depends on the amount of weight and fat we lose during a diet, as well as the depth and duration of the deficit we use to get those results. So those that reduce their calories the most and lost and sustained the most amount of weight loss in this trial should have experienced the most amount of metabolic adaptation. And the reason I hit on this specifically is it's important to realize that, that metabolic adaptation does occur during weight loss and when you keep off a substantial amount of weight, but we shouldn't treat this as this issue that's like a boogeyman, which is automatically going to cause fat regain and metabolic damage. Because if that was the case, those individuals, even within the study that had lost the most amount of weight, they would have been most predisposed to regaining the most amount of weight, which is not what we see. And in reality, we see most individuals experience a drop in their resting metabolic rate of 50 to 70 calories, like I mentioned previously. And that's not something someone should have to worry about. And another thing I think is a real big issue within this industry is a lot of people don't, when we talk about weight regain, a lot of people don't separate weight and fat loss post-diet. And what we have to realize is it's completely normal to regain scale weight after a diet. When we diet, we not only lose body fat and body weight, but we also lose glycogen and the water that's associated with that glycogen content. So for every gram of glycogen that we lose about 3 to 4 grams of water. The same thing when we increase our carbohydrate intake. So if you go back to maintenance, say that you were losing a pound a week and you were in a 500 calorie deficit. If you increase your calorie intake by 500 calories per day, and that's 125 grams of carbohydrates right there, you're not only bringing 125 grams of carbs that are being stored, but you're also bringing, say, another 500 grams of water that comes with that. So right then and there, that's 625 grams. And in terms of weight, that's about a 1.3 pounds or 1.4 pounds, give or take, that you're automatically gaining without having gained any fat because you're at maintenance calories. So we have to realize that there's a big difference between, going back to maintenance and seeing an increase in our weight on the scale and actually regaining, actual body fat. It's part of the process to regain some of our weight, because when you end a diet, you're at an artificially lowered body weight. You're glycogen depleted, you have less gut content, you have less water content. Your body is not as well hydrated as it would normally be when you're fully fed. And so it should be normal to regain some weight, but a lot of people will take, they'll think they gained 3 pounds post diet and something's wrong with them, because they ate for a couple of days. And that's not the case. There's a difference between body fat regain and body weight regain.
All right. Well, then with all that being said, does metabolism change as we age?
I think this is another myth, my man. What do you think?
I
want to know based off your experience, because I will tell you, I'm going to tell you my own experience is I encounter so many people, and I have over the years, that they're in their 30s and 40s. So that's probably my general, like my age group is between 30s and mid 40s, and they believe their metabolism isn't the same as they were in their 20s. So I don't know if you encounter the same thing, but I do.
I be honest with you, I've seen people in their 40s and 50s shape up pretty decently if they're pretty tight with it. I think that I do know this for a fact. Once I have a few people over 70, very little, if any, changes happen up there. But usually I can see changes. They're really damn impressive in the 40s and 50s. I usually have 40, 50s and then like 70s. I don't have anyone in 60s. But I think there was a research study that came out not too long ago that said it was in the 60s that it actually began slowing down.
Yes.
And it was more digestion related. I think it was kind of like the cause behind it because the digestion goes down. But I can't really recall that. But
we'll go over
go for it. Sure.
Because that was one of my favorite studies. Because I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I've had so many clients over the last 10 years that have come to me and have told me things like, I had such a better metabolism when I was in my 20s. And then I'll ask them about their lifestyle, back then compared to now. And now they have 3 kids. They work a sedentary job. They work in an office. but when they were in college, they played intramural sports or they were on a college sports team. They went out, they went to the gym 5 to 6 days a week, and they went to the club 3 nights a week. So they were always doing something. And here's the thing, I always try to give them a comparison. Like, let's think about your activity then and your stress levels then, your sleep quality then, as compared to now. And there's the massive difference. And that's really what we're seeing in terms of a difference in total daily energy expenditure, because these people will always come back to me, well, I was leaner back then. I was able to eat more back then. But guys, for anyone that believes that in the audience, I'm here to tell you that the data doesn't support this, nor does my years actually working with these individuals. So they come to me under this misconception, this preconceived notion that they had a better metabolism in their 20s than they do in their 40s. However, when I've prioritized building muscle, maintaining higher levels of physical activity, and incorporating proper nutrition with these clients, regardless if they're 45 or 50, or if they're 30, I've seen these clients anywhere from their mid 30s to their early 50s make impressive physique transformations and build physiques that were honestly better than their throwback Thursday photos that they showed me when they first came to me. You know what I mean? So when we first had our initial consult, a lot of times, and I'm sure, Jeff, you get this as well, where they'll show you a picture of what they look like in college. And they looked good, don't get me wrong, 20 years prior, but often I've gotten guys on stage that look 10 times better after a year or two working together than they ever did in their 20s. And then they realize it's not their metabolism, it was their activity levels, it was their lifestyle, it was their nutrition over the last 10 to 15 years that set them back. It had nothing to do with their metabolic rate. But also, to go on what you were hitting on, there was a recent paper, it was just released last year by Poncer and colleagues. And what they found was total daily energy expenditure was stable across a life course from the ages of 20 to 60 years old when fat-free mass was accounted for. And it only started to slow and decline. And it was a slow decline after the age of 60. So we do not see an independent drop in resting metabolic rate or total daily energy expenditure until we get into our 60s, which is when we do start seeing age-related decline. And what they actually saw was that the internal organs, what you were relating to, it wasn't digestion, it was actually internal organs related. So we have to realize that our fat-free mass accounts for the majority of our resting metabolic rate. When we actually look into the studies, I believe it's between our lean body mass accounts for 69 to 70% of our resting metabolic rate. And so lean body mass or fat-free mass, that accounts for our muscle tissue, our organ mass, our glycogen content, stuff like that. And so our organs are the most metabolically active tissue. So like our heart, our kidneys, our brain, that is the most metabolically active tissue. It burns more calories per pound than even muscle does. However, what ends up happening is, and this kind of makes sense, like the researchers kind of extrapolated in their conclusions, but they said, first of all, we know that the organs aren't burning as many calories per hour as they did when they were young. So we know that with elderly, but they also think that it has to do with the fact that a lot of the internal organ systems are getting downregulated in older age. So they're less active, but also that's a lot of times when we start seeing, men having kidney disorder and kidney disease. We start seeing heart-related issues, brain cognitive decline. So these tissues are not only as active within their day-to-day life, but they're also not as efficient at burning energy. So they're actually downregulating their energy expenditure. And so that's the major reason as to why we see a decline. And also we see after 60 is more where anabolic resistance sets in. So these individuals are more predisposed towards losing fat-free mass. So they're losing muscle, they're losing organ mass, and so they have less metabolically active tissue. So we start seeing a gradual decline in our 60s through our, later years.
Yeah, you want to know something interesting though? When you talk to like older people, they all say that like eating hurts. It's very interesting. Like they just tend not to eat as much. And I've noticed that with like, especially my 70-year-olds.
Well,
and they say it like started, like they'll be, I'm like, well, when did it start? They're like, kind of like late 50s, early 60s. And that's also like when sleep goes to complete trash. Like they'll be getting up at like 4 a.m. out of nowhere, and stuff like that.
So what's interesting about that is that they do lose fat-free mass. So they're losing organ mass, but we do know that there's something called the aminostatic or the protein static model, which indicates that our body wants a certain amount of fat-free mass, and it also regulates our hunger and our appetite. So what I think, and I don't know this from research, I'm kind of taking from different areas of the literature, but I have noticed with older, relatives that I have, even older clients that I've worked with over their 60s, they struggle not only with appetite, but especially with protein, because protein's so satiating. So it's like I have to include, like, generally what I have done with my clients that are over 60, first of all, they're anabolically resistant. So we know that they don't get the same anabolic response in terms of muscle protein synthesis to lower levels of protein. So in the literature, we see that a young 20-year-old will respond to about 20 to 25 grams of high quality protein. So like a whey protein isolate shake. However, when they look at the same type of responses post-training in those that are 50 to 60 and elderly, they need at least 40 grams as a minimum threshold just to get that same increase in muscle protein synthesis. But with that increase in protein intake is going to come higher satiety, so more fullness. So what I generally will do will be small meat portions, and then I'll put a protein shake or I'll put a protein bar with that, something that's easy for them to get down. Often, I actually, there's a brand I won't name, but they have fruit flavored shakes. And so what I'll do is I'll just have them do it almost like a drink, you know what I mean, along with their meals, so that they get, they hit that protein intake needed to trigger the leucine threshold and trigger muscle protein synthesis, but they're able to get enough calories and get those nutrients in. But I will say that they do lose fat-free mass. So that could be one of the driving causes as to why they lose part of their appetite.
Yeah, it's just something that it's stuck with me because I've heard it so much in like my gym and just older clients I've trained and things like that. And I'm just like, the only thing I know how to do is just like, I'm like, hey man, whey protein shakes are nice. Like, even I like
another
them.
thing that I've tried, and I've also done this with vegan and vegetarian clients, is I've added essential amino acid products to get the full spectrum of essential amino acids that they're lacking within their protein source, whether it be from the protein source itself, so like a vegan protein source, a plant-based protein source, or if they're not hitting the threshold. So I've done this with females, I've done this with elderly clients, and then I've also done this with vegans and vegetarians, where I'll add specifically an essential amino acid product to hit that leucine threshold, which is generally around 3 grams per meal.
Correct. Yeah, that's actually not. Now I have a question for you. Do you have a brand that you recommend? Because some vegan dieters and vegetarian dieters are very picky about the byproducts that go into products.
So I worked for a company years ago called Nutribio, and they are a manufacturer of their own products, and they have both vegan based and they have vegan based, and then also just non-artificially sweetened branched chain or essential amino acid products. They have different lines of essentials, so you could get one that's really good flavored artificially, you get one that's naturally sweetened, and they don't come from bird feathers, because honestly a lot of essential amino acid products are actually composed of bird feathers. And so they have a really good manufacturing facility first and foremost, and then also you can get laboratory testing, independent third-party laboratory testing on any one of their products. So all you do is I order the products myself, despite the fact that I no longer work with them. But anytime you get a barcode from them in terms of the product package, you could scan it on an independent website and see the purity in the batch. So you see they guarantee at least 99.9% purity. And just for people out there in the industry that aren't within this part of the industry, generally supplement companies, to meet the FDA certifications and the good manufacturing practices guidelines, you have to be at least at a 95% efficacy, meaning 95% of the ingredients in your product need to be what they're dosed at. But there can be some variance, because obviously each batch varies, product to product. Right. However, Nutribio will send back any products that don't meet that 99.9% purity. So you're getting everything that it says that's in the label, and you could verify that and check that on a, they work with a company that does all their own testing and that independently certifies it. And if it doesn't meet claims, they send it back.
It's good to know. Thanks for recommending that to the audience, because I know that struggles a lot. I actually had a client hit me with that the other day, and I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know," but like, kind of like, look around. If you do find anything, let me know. And I'll be sure to hear that. All right, last question. This might be the best one of them all. Do females, the ladies, have slower metabolism than males?
All right, so this is a shout out to a couple of our audience members, specifically females, that had asked me about this. So I did want to go over this. So actually, in the
do you have a fan club? Like, is it like a brand new shirtless fan club? Ladies, if you all are listening, will you please just hit me up on IG and let me know if it's the look at, he's blushing. Oh shit. All right. Anyway, go ahead.
All right. So within the same study that I covered from Poncer, they also found that the total daily energy expenditure was similar between men and women when fat-free mass was equated for. So men did have higher absolute total daily energy expenditures when looking at a head-to-head comparison between males and females, but that's just because men tend to have around 10% more fat-free mass than women and also tend to be heavier, which increases our total daily energy expenditure. But when they analyzed the data, they found that, and this is a quote, I'm actually going to pull this up real quick. Give me a second.
I gladly will.
So this is from Ponzer himself, because I wanted to make sure, I have evidence behind it. Sex had no effect on total expenditure in multivariate models with fat-free mass and fat mass, nor in analyses of adjusted total expenditure. And that's PMID 268-32439. And so, guys, your sex alone does not independently alter the amount of calories you burn, as the biggest influence on our total daily energy expenditure is the amount of fat-free mass we have, not our sex. So females will not automatically have a lower resting metabolic rate and total daily energy expenditure than males. They just tend to, on average, as the biggest influences, like we mentioned, on these, parameters are our levels of lean body mass and total body weight, which are both usually higher in most males than females, as males tend to have an average of 10% more muscle mass and 10% less fat mass than females. And we see that within the literature because women, even if we look at essential body fats, men have around 3% essential body fat, whereas females have about 12% essential body fat. And that's for, really the process of reproduction. They need to have more essential body fat to carry a baby to term. And so here's the thing. If we were to take a female client who has the same amount of lean body mass and the same body weight as a male client, and they both had the same levels of activity, they had the same training histories, all the same anthropometrics, the female client would burn just as many calories as the male. So ladies, you're not at a disadvantage, or it's not that I really want to make this a message to our female listeners that your sex is not holding you back for the body you want. You can build the same amount, and we see this in the literature as well. You guys can build the same amount of relative rates of muscle and strength and also have the same metabolic rates when scaled to your body composition, meaning your muscle mass, your fat mass, and overall weight, than males. So by focusing on resistance training, hitting your steps, eating nutrient dense foods, you'll be able to maximize your metabolisms too. And that's something that I see so many women come to me, and oftentimes they'll say, I have a low metabolic rate, or, I feel like I'm predisposed towards fat gain. And it's a lot of their lifestyle factors. These are I encounter a lot of mothers in this case where they think there's something A, wrong with them, or B, that they're predisposed towards, not being able to build muscle or get the physique they want. And they think it's a limitation, both of their sex as well as maybe their previous dieting history. And that's where I really try to empower them with this education. I try to tell them these things or send them these studies, or even if I'm not sending them a direct study because I know they're not going to read it, I try to give them an interpretation of the studies so that they realize, hey, listen, there's no limitation except in my mind. So if I can get over this self-limiting belief, if I can believe in myself and my abilities and put in the work, change my habits, modify my behaviors, I can do everything that I want to and attain the physique that I want. I've seen so many women. I'm very fortunate. I work with a lot of mothers that have turned their lives, their physiques around, and it's not only helped them from a confidence perspective, like their quality of life, but it's rubbed off on their kids. Like there's no better feeling in the world than having mothers that I work with, especially I work with a lot of single mothers that are like feel empowered, and they have daughters that are younger, and they're like their kid is like staying in the daycare, during the gym, like they're younger, and they see their mom and they like love that their mom's this strong, like empowered woman. And I love that. I love getting that feedback from these mothers, because they went from a place where they felt that they were at a disadvantage in many aspects, not just in a physical aspect, financial aspect, or from just being a single mother or whatever it may be. But I always try to tell them, like, you're a fucking superhero, like you're Wonder Woman. There's so many things. Like, I was pretty much raised by a single mother, and she's the strongest individual that I've ever met, and someone that's made an impact that I can never thank her for, nor could I ever express my gratitude and love for this woman. And so I've seen that. My mother was in the military, so she's like a hardened woman, like, like she's a workhorse. And I got my work ethic from her. However, she never had those self-limiting beliefs. There was nothing she couldn't do. There was never like a male dominated workforce that she was intimidated by, but that was her upbringing. Like, that's just how my grandparents were. My grandmother was a very empowered woman herself. And so she always saw that example. And the same thing happened within my family. Like my aunt's a dean at a medical school. My other aunt's like a big executive at IBM. They both have PhDs. Like, these are empowered, educated women, but there's so many women that they think they're at this disadvantage to men and that it's this male dominated world. But I really do try to get across to them, like, you guys have the same opportunities, the same abilities to prosper within your physique, within your life. And so I hope that this type of knowledge, like, a couple of you ladies out there that listen to our podcast, that I really appreciate your feedback and all your support. You guys asked me like, hey, listen, what goes on metabolically with women? Like, this, that, and the other. You guys, a lot of women also had questions on the metabolic damage and starvation mode. So I really hope that this information not only educates you guys, but empowers you as well.
Dude, I appreciate you giving that insight to the audience, because I know a little bit about that. So B, that wraps us up for the week. Guys, thanks for giving us a little feedback. Be sure to clue us in, because that helps us as we go along, kind of frame, so we make sure we put together the best thing we can for you all. Not gonna lie, Brandon handles a lot of this, and it's great because
I get a ton of messages from you guys, which I really appreciate. I really do. We really do try to give back to the audience. So when you guys have a question, like, specifically, I had multiple females ask me about female metabolism. There have been many topics that we've dove into and that I've specifically studied because of you guys out there. So always let us know your feedback, any questions you have. And also, I want to announce this because next week we have a special guest, which I'm so excited for. It's going to be Dr. Eric Helms is going to be on the podcast. So another researcher and practitioner, someone that's been in the trenches. He's a natural pro bodybuilder. He's someone that has brought people to worlds in terms of bodybuilding, but also powerlifting. He's had powerlifting world champions under him. And so we are really excited to dive into the depths of knowledge with someone that's not only done it himself, been in the trenches as a pro bodybuilder, been in the trenches with clients, but also has done a prominent amount of research and has done a lot of research actually with our previous guest, Dr. not Dr. Alan Aragon, but Alan Aragon himself. So I'm really excited for that. And I hope you guys are looking forward to that episode as well, because I know we are.
Yeah, no, that one's going to be super tight. I'm looking forward to that. I've not had a chance to meet him, but I have studied his work for a while. So it'll be cool. B, where can everybody find you at, man?
Guys, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at Brandon DeCruz _ or on email at bdecruzfitness@gmail.com.
I am Jeff Unbreakable Black on Instagram, and you guys can hit me up at jeff@relentlessforever.com. Y'all feel free to message me just as much if you like to. But ladies, I'm very, very serious about the Brandon shirtless stuff. Please let me know, because I like to post screenshots of conversations. They're pretty funny sometimes. So anyway, with that being said, B, it was nice as always, and y'all have yourself a good day. Look forward to it. Peace. Later.